what may be the final part for now. We'll see. But I'll keep everyone up to date. By the way, if you want to keep up to date about when I'll stream again about this, I will post on Twitter, so you can follow me on Twitter. I post in the chat. I hope everyone is seeing the chat. I'm not sure. We'll see. But yeah, so well, we stopped here where we basically have a player rendered way too large. It seems to me that it's also not rendered in the correct position. So what we'll do is, fortunately, we kept around our little circle. So what we're actually going to do is we're also going to render, for debugging purposes, we render our circle again. So we still have, so we do the same center, and we'll do a radius of, let's say, 5, and then we'll use our circle paint that we still have, right? So we want to figure out, and the thing is we render that after the player, because then we'll be on top of it. So there was no way to restart. So it's an error that we have, okay. Alright, so we need to do 2 offsets here too. Fine, no problem. So now, so we have this is odd, right? Like, clearly something is weird. The player is way too large, so we need to actually make the player as large as a tile, right? But now it's basically super large, and we want it to fit exactly in a tile. So how can we do that? Well, we have a player sprite, and we know it needs to be that large, so we actually can give it that information when we create the sprite. So as I said before, right now we were deriving the the width and the height directly from the image, but now we're going to allow overriding the width and the height, right? So we say either it's the one that we provided, or if it's null, use the one from the image, right? So okay, so obviously now we need to give it here as well. We give it some other name here because that will be part of the API. All right, and since it's optional, right, we'll make it like that. Make it like name parameters, height, okay. All right, so and the same thing we need to do. We actually create it here. All right, so same thing with. We're doing this a little bit different than the Flame people did, but it basically does the same thing. I don't know what's going on. Why doesn't it want height? Oh. All right. Now here we have to do the same thing. We have to be able to give width and height as well, right? All right. So we got all that in place. And now all we have to basically, so let's make all this look nicer. I don't know what just happened. Okay. Let's make this look nicer. We're going to put a comma. So this is like a nice little way to make Dart code format differently. Like that. Okay, cool. So now we got that. And now all that we have to do is in the main thing, we need to give it the width and the height. So we say width, and it's the same thing as the game props tile size, and the height is also game props tile size. Also make that render nicely. Okay, so now if we refresh like that, it might not work yet because we are part of main. We actually have to restart the whole thing. So let's try that. Well, I think at least that should do it. But let's look through our code while this is reloading. So here's the width and the height, right? So we are clearly taking the width and the height into account when we create the source rectangle, right? So it should actually run. Okay, so it's not doing what we want it to do. So that is interesting. Not entirely sure. So what we'll do is we add a toString method here, and we'll just print out the width. Okay. It's gonna actually stay like this. Okay, and then we'll go back to main and we'll print out player sprite. So this is the first thing we need to solve. Otherwise, okay, so it's actually reloading this. So here's the thing. See that? Something didn't go right. So it has somehow the wrong width and height. So let's see why that is. Oh, that's because we're not parsing it here. Okay. Width and height. Oh, it's also named, I think. And height as well. You're already starting to see, like, if you have too many. Okay, now that it's gone entirely. We have width height 40. Where is our player? Nowhere to be seen. So this whole business here with the source in this, we're messing something up here. Let's actually put a breakpoint here, and or maybe we can just print it out. Debug, print. Let's just do the source. And if you can't figure it out, we can always look through the flame code because I already did figure that out. Okay, we need import the. All right. So let's see what happens here. So we got 0040. Oh, that's a problem. No, actually, it's not a problem. It's saying that it should render it starting 6060, right? With and it's from x from 60 to 100, y from 60 to 100, which is about here. And the source. Oh, but it might be that the source actually needs to be like the source here needs to actually be the entire image. Right, so let's just hard code here that we do 200. Okay, so see that? So actually the source rec needs to be the entire image, right, width and height. Otherwise it doesn't work. So what I'm confused about, how do they do it here? I'm gonna look a little bit at how the framework does it. So that's what I'm confused about. Why does it work here? So they actually are allowing to override this. And then when they render it, here we go, scale. Render scaled. So we cannot just render part of the, so we actually need to take the, okay, so we don't want to override actually the width and height of the image. We want to override the scale. Maybe they're calculating the scale. So the scale here. I wonder in my code on the when I use the framework, I'm wondering if I did actually override the scale. So let's look at this a little bit. So we actually render centered. Actually giving the width and height of, where did that come from? Okay, so the width and height are the tile size, also here. And then here's some other things that we're doing, which we're going to look at in a second. But I'm rendering at 0, 0, and then I'm rendering width and height. And I'm using the same method, render centered, that we were looking at. Okay, so let's, so this should work. Right. So render centered. So maybe we have some bug in here. But maybe this is like the problem right here. Maybe I need to do something like this here actually. So this will become the dist. Okay. So let's just steal this code and make that happen. So right, so let's just not do this. So this is like the position. And this is the width. Okay, so what we'll do is now x equals center dot, and then final y equals center dot dy, and then basically have x and then minus width divided by 2, and then you have y minus height divided by 2, and then we have width and height. Alright, so now we changed what the dist is. Even though it looked fine to me, but let's just see what kind of values we get now. So now we have no play at all anymore. And actually it looks perfectly correct. It renders at 4040 to 8080. Just not showing up. Pretty much the same exact thing. So we ended up with the same, except now it's assuming that we're giving it the position of the player on the top left, right? Which actually we don't want to do. It is very odd. So what if I just give it the same thing? We're just experimenting here. What? It didn't. Oh, see, it actually re-renders when we resize the canvas. Oh, it's because again we have the width and height. So this source thing, it just doesn't work for some reason. So it needs to be the image width. and the image height. All right, and then 2 double. Okay, so now we're rendering again. Okay, okay. Beautiful. Now this is exactly what we wanted to do, right? So actually what this is doing, yeah, this is right. So we're pausing at the center, but it wants to render it as a rectangle from left, right, from here to here, right? We reverse the cameras, so it wants to render from here to here. It wants to know how to render this, so it wants to start always here. So what we're doing is we're adjusting the center that we give it to actually be minus width half. So we're moving the point here, and then we move that point down here. And then we give it the width and the height. And so now we're happy. And we're rendering exactly where we want to. So basically, at this point, I'm going to do a quick check-in. Because we have something working. Player rendering at sprite image at correct position. Okay. Okay. So before we can move on though to doing some animation, what I actually want to do is I want to animate the rotation of the player, and that brings us to an interesting thing. Basically, we want to be able to spin the player, okay, but it has to stay in the same spot, okay. So first of all, we'll add to our player model, we'll add an angle, and final double angle, right? Right now it's at 0. You can see like so if you have X and Y, how can I undo everything? I guess I can't. Just reload. Okay, so I don't know what was this, but I just want to draw. So here we go. Have a pen. So basically, if we have, so we have our player here, right? And as you saw, the gun points this way, right? And so that's basically 0 degrees. So if you have a triangle, right? The way we have the cameras, that's another reason why we have it 0, 0, is because this is 0, and then basically goes in this direction, right? So this is 90 degrees, 180 degrees. So if I'm not mistaken, this is pi, and then this is, if we come back, it's 2 pi, right? So in radians. For instance, what we'll do is we'll try to move the player around this by increasing the angle. And so right now it's 0, and at 2 pi basically will be back to normal. So that's what we're doing. So let's first of all add the angle here. All right. And then also we want to render it when we change that. Okay, so we want to also print it out. Okay, so what we have here is we still have this, the sprite is still loaded from there. So what we do now is we want to give it, when we create our model, don't need that anymore. When we create our model here, we'll actually, when we're building the model, okay, so when we're building the model here, in the models, what we'll actually do is we create this player, and we set the angle to something like pi divided by 2, okay? Okay, and so, okay, so now the thing is that you might think, okay, well, how do I then actually make that rotation happen, right? So, and that's the tricky part. So when we render the player, we somehow need to rotate something first. So you cannot say, like, raw image rect does not take any angle. You can't give it an angle. Well, how do you do it? Well, you have to rotate the canvas first. And that's the tricky part. At least it was for me. It was tricky to understand. So basically, when you draw the player, you want to say before you render it, you want to say canvas dot rotate, and then you basically say so let's just assign this to some little variable, right? You want to rotate it to the angle. Okay, that's fine, right? And so let's see if that actually would work. Well, our player now is totally gone. What happened? Well, at first it didn't seem to be doing anything, but now it's like totally, everything is totally screwed up. And that's because we didn't save the canvas, first of all. But there's another problem. When we rotate it, it doesn't know what to rotate about, right? It doesn't know where to rotate from. So basically what's happening is that it rotated from here. So somehow the whole canvas got kind of like rotated. Unfortunately, it did that before it drew the grid lines. Otherwise, we would have other problems. So if I do this, actually, we should get weird grid lines. Yeah, so we don't even get any grid lines because now everything's screwed up. So this is like a really tricky thing with the canvas. So what we want to actually do is we need to first go to where the player is. So what is canvas? It takes two things. Okay, so we need to dot x y. So and then we rotate. Let's see if that works better. Okay, so we're a little better now, right? So we are a little better now, but there's still some weird stuff going on, and that's because we need to actually save the canvas before we do any of this stuff. And then when we're done, we restore. But you can actually see that the player is rotated now, right? So we succeeded there. And now it should actually work. Okay, we still have the same problem, it seems like. Okay, let's see. Oh, the problem is, okay, yeah, the problem is now, since we already translated the canvas to be there, so the origin now is there, we actually need to draw the player at just offset to 0. So basically, right, we basically moved the origin there, we rotated, and now we want to draw the player while it's being rotated, right? While it's still rotated. And we also want to draw a circle, and you're going to see that the circle will stay there. So we do that. Now it should actually be, the player should be in the correct position. So now we can see that. So basically, since we already moved the canvas to here, so now the canvas origin is here, right? So let's just, it's right here now, right? So now, and then it's rotated, so it's in a weird state anyways. And then if we then, it's rotated, but so if you don't rotate it, for instance, right? Let's just say, don't rotate it. You can see the dot will be here, and that makes perfect sense because what happened is we moved the origin here, right? So now the origin is here. We draw the player, but we draw it at 0, but we draw the dot as if the origin was still here. And so that's why the dot ends up over here, which is not what we want. So that's how, and since we were rotated though by 90 degrees, the dot ended up over here. Okay. So that's that. So if we rotate, and then we actually have to also do offset 0 here. And actually, surprisingly enough, in a lot of cases, when you actually finally render sprite or the thing, you end up doing it in this weird way, like where basically you actually move the canvas to where you want to draw, you do all the transformations, and then you basically do offset 0 for the location of the thing. So, but here's the thing. You could argue, why don't we include this in the sprite? Why don't we just say render and do all this like stuff, move the canvas there, and maybe we can give it an angle. Well, that makes sense in a way, but the thing is, what if you want to also draw something else? So maybe we want to rotate the canvas, do this, and then we want to draw a player, but as you can see, we also wanted to draw a circle. So it would kind of be stupid because then we have, it doesn't make sense, right? So in a way, like we want to keep the sprite simple. If we ever repeat this code 3,000 times the same way, we can maybe make a wrapper sprite that does a rotation for us or something. But for now, we keep it that way. So now we can actually also remove the circle if we wanted to look a little better. Actually, that didn't really do anything. Okay, now that thing is done. It doesn't really hurt anything though to keep it for now, at least for our own sanity. So now, okay, so we got the player angle. Okay. So now how can we rotate it? So we're going to do the stupidest possible thing. And we're going to actually just implement a little timer that causes our thing to redraw. And so that's when we would need a stateful widget. Okay, but we may not want to do that. What we actually want is a game loop, right? We want a real game loop. And the problem is, how do we do that? And that's where Flame comes in, where we're going to look at some stuff. This might actually take a little bit longer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check in this code as is. Supporting angle when, let's say rotation when rendering. Okay, so okay, so the player now starts pointing up, which is 90 degrees, fine. But now let's look at how the game, and this is actually very interesting. Flame. So I'm going to start so simple at the game. So when you do a game, basically how Flame wants you to do it is they want you to implement this game. You want to extend from this game, and then all you have to do is you call you implement update and you implement render and resize as well if you want to. So and then Flame does all these things for you. Basically, it does all the somehow it's ticking, and that's kind of what I want to look at. So maybe for now, since we only have, I'm going to stop right at on the top of the hour. We only got about 15 or something minutes left. We just start walking through the code a little bit and try to understand what this is. So first of all, we create a widget builder. Okay, so the widget builder, what's that? Okay, well there you go. It's part of Flame. It's part of this game thing. So first of all, what it does, it creates a widget. Interesting enough, it's not a widget itself, so it doesn't extend from status widget or something, which most well, all widgets do in Flutter, but it creates one. And actually what it does, it uses a gesture detector as a wrapper. And why does it do that? Well, because it wants you to give you on tap and all this stuff. I found that not to be super necessary because you can easily just wrap your entire game with that, or your canvas or something. And for now, we'll basically leave that out. But it does that, and inside of it, it creates a container. And then inside of, so it's a container which has a game background color, which you can override, which by default seems to be nothing. Transparent. Actually, it's black. Yeah, that's black. Okay, fine. Not a big deal. We can easily do that. And then it has directionality, which, okay, left to right. Not sure why it does that. Oh, so that's an interesting aspect, actually. So that's might have to do with how it wants to draw text on the HUD. Don't have to worry about that now. But this is like what we need to look at. Embedded game object. Okay. So this is where everything basically happens. But the thing is, interesting enough. Okay, so all right, so we're getting deeper here. So we got the embedded game object. you can give it a size, so you can limit actually how big your canvas can be and so on. And it implements this leave rendered object. And so let me actually make this a little bigger to read the comments better here. There's a widget embedded game inside widget tree. Compared with simple game or any other, it handles for positioning, size constraints, and other factors that arise when your game is embedded within the component tree. Provide with a game instance for your game and options have widget. Okay. All right. So yeah, we're not going to worry about the size at this point. So we got that. So what's happening here? So it's a leave render object widget. So basically they are just like to render stuff, right? They have no children. So if you go to render object widget, you can create element, create render object, update render object. Okay. But there's no build, for instance, right? But I mean, widget does have build, I think. So it's part of that too. So it has a build, should have a build. Okay. We don't have to understand all the super details here. You're getting pretty deep into Flutter if you follow that. So, but the main important thing is, so it constrains itself to the size and the width height that's given. Okay, so that's fine. So it's basically just, so actually all we need for now is this part, right? And so where does the game render box? Okay, and so it constrains the game render box, right? So it constrains the game render box, and so the game, and then there's an update here. So where it changes, what's the render box here? That's really weird. So it actually gets, it returns the game constraint box, which it then gets passed in again, I guess when resizing happens, and then it can basically, it basically does the same thing as above here, right? It's like the same code pretty much. So then it basically, this is happening most likely on a resize, and then it updates the render object. Okay, fine. So we can live with that. We can probably maybe start pulling in here. And so why is the game important? Well, the game is updated from the game render box. So here we got the game render box. Size by parent, fine. And the game render box has a bunch of other things. So first of all, it updates the game whenever something happens. So the game is the thing that you implement, right? And then here is schedules ticks, and that's the important part. This is now our game loop, right? There's a bunch of stuff basically related to make Flutter work correctly. So bind lifecycle listener, for instance, is add observer. Not sure entirely what that does. It seems to be like whenever, maybe whenever the app closes, we are correctly cleaning things up. So let's just say that. And then actually it updates the game on this. So basically it's just like, you could call it a decorator pattern where it wraps the game, it does a bunch of rendering related stuff for Flutter. And then it updates the game with things that it thinks the game should know, right? And we basically have to figure out how do we pull this out to make sense for us. Now, here we schedule tick. And so basically what we do here is we schedule frame callback. So, and that to me seems like, you have the same thing in the browser. I can't remember the name at this point. When do I just see the comment here. When do I scream JavaScript? Well, right now I'm not. I might. But talking about JavaScript, in the DOM there's also some method where you can get basically the frame, basically a new render frame, kind of tick instead of making your own timer, which is not the best idea. So So this gives you a schedule frame callback. So every time it's about to render a new frame, right, or basically you have a frame rate, right? Every time one of those tick happens, it'll call you here. So this is way better than implementing a timer, which you could in Flutter implement a timer. But we're not going to do this. So we're going to do this the same way. So the frame callback ID is just there so we can unschedule it when we're detaching. Okay, fine. So it seems to me that we actually need this render box here. And what's the widgets bindings? Okay, so that's just there so we can, okay. So that's the main meat of everything. And the game, we'll just have to implement, it will just be the game. And we'll just implement the parts of that game that we think make sense to us. It will just be our game. It will not be an abstract class. Right? So basically, I mean, it might be an abstract class, but we only have one implementation, obviously, of it. And the thing is, like, this code, we'll probably just type this up once we get there. Most likely, it will be very close to a copy-paste. Because these are things that probably took a while to figure out, and that part is working, and I have no problem with that in the framework. Like, that part worked for me greatly. We'll just take that as is, pretty much. But still, we will not just do a huge copy-paste. We'll implement this piece by piece as part of the engine. Right. So what we'll start with, we actually, I said there will be no game base class. As I said, not entirely. There will be only one implementation for it. So we make the game here, and it will be an abstract class. Right. And so basically, we'll look at what this actually has. And I'm looking directly at the code. I'm not sure about this widget builder because most likely, yeah, we'll see how the widget builder makes sense. I'm so confused about this. So why? So what I don't understand is why we don't just have a component that's part of Flutter into which we pass a game. That would make more sense to me. So basically here I'm just going to pull in the important methods here. So we have an update method, and the update method will have a DT. That's basically the delta time that passed since the last update. Right? So basically when you kind of, for instance, like you say your player has a speed, right? Well, it's a certain velocity, and in 1 second it will move maybe to here, in 2 seconds it will move to here. So if you get your update and 2 seconds have passed, then you need to just make a jump here, right? Obviously, like the time is much less than 2 seconds, but that's kind of explained it. So then the renderer, that takes the canvas, right? And so basically this, I'm gonna make a show here as well. So this basically, so update here on the game will have to take care of all its, all its pieces. Has to update the player, maybe if the player shot, has to update the bullets, right, to position everything. And then the renderer is just there to then show everything. So the game would work without rendering anything. It basically you just update the models, and you have a perfect state. But obviously then you wouldn't see anything. Wouldn't be fun. So then we have a resize, and that's interesting because that one gives you a canvas. Or actually gives you a size. Okay, so it doesn't give you a canvas. I'm a little bit surprised why it doesn't give you a canvas, because I thought when in the render box there was something like that. Okay, so basically, just for showing this. This is called as part of the perform resize, which is just giving the base constraints. So there's no canvas at that point. So that's why it only passes the size. Okay, may also not make sense to pass the size. Anyway, so okay, fine, no problem at all. So we go back to the game over here. Don't need the background color right now. We just have always black or transparent. Life cycle change. I mean, so I'm just not gonna implement anything that we don't need. But I mean, well. So let's just add this one in. And it's already implemented. So these are just things that we may go into later. I'm not 100% happy that, yeah, I don't want it here, actually. I don't want it. We can always add it there. The cool thing is that we understand how everything is supposed to work. So there's something for debugging where you can record the DT. And now here's the interesting thing. Actually, there are two methods here that I think are important. Attach and detach. So so we never have a widgets overlay. And that's why we also don't need, at least for now, we don't have one. So these are actually interesting because what we can do here is on detach, we can actually save the model somehow in some variable, and on attach we can restore it. So that means like if we are developing and we are and we just change some code and we just want to see if it works, and we don't want to actually change the state of the game when we refresh, we can actually save the game model and then restore it here, and that way we'll still exactly the way things were. So that's interesting. The one other interesting thing here is this one. And that's what I don't like. So, well, let's not even do it yet. I don't like that we create a game and then we call the widget on it, and that then gives us the magic builder. It gives us the magic. Actually, what I would like to do more is, I would like to see more is implement a game, and then you directly put the game thing in, like the widget, into your tree. This is I don't necessarily like the way they did that there. So let's actually pull this one over here, and we got like 2 minutes. So this widget builder, right? When we build, we pass the game in, right? Only then to pass into the embedded widget and so on, right? What we could instead do, why don't we make that widget builder, why don't we make this thing, this entire thing with the gesture detector and everything, why don't we make that a widget that takes a game and so that you directly put into your thing, right? So basically what I'm talking about is, instead of having this, you have a stateless widget. I think it's stateless, or at least that part is stateless. So stateless widget, and we call it game widget, right? And so, and that one takes as a dependency, it takes a game, and that's it. You just pause the game, nothing else. And then basically that. So I wonder if I put that all together, it probably makes sense to be all together here. There's not that much in here anyways. So, right? And that's pretty much it. So then we have the game, and so then we build it, and now we can actually start copying stuff. It'll actually be a gesture detector. So this one is a pure copy at this point, right? But here's a question: do we really want this? On tap, so it wraps it already with the Gedge detector, and I don't like that because I can easily. Why do you want to call my game on tap? Basically, what I want to instead do is I want to store all gestures in a somewhere, and then on the update blue, I actually want to see what happened. I don't want to call my game with this yet. So what do I actually do? We remove this widget. We don't want this. So what I don't understand is why it is a container. It's only for the background color. Okay, fine. So we do colors transparent or something. Okay, good. So we got that part taken care of. And now we basically at the embedded game widget. And that's where we stop for now. Unfortunately, like at this point, we can't check this in because it doesn't even build. And also we have to implement the embedded game widget yet. I'm not sure about the directionality. What does that even, why do we have that? Left to right. I'm going to remove that for now also. Things we don't understand, we don't want to put in there. So we understand why the container is there. It's just there to give it a background color. And then the embedded game widget, it's actually not that big. So I'm actually going to put that in here real quick before we close, and we close in a second. So now we get the game widget. And get the game. We don't want to position. See if size is part of. Yeah, so size exists in where? Where are we now? In geometry dart. Okay, so good. And so we give it a random constraint box. Alright. And so game random box you still have to put. And so size, I think the only bad part is that has dx. No. Why is this not happy? Ah, it's width and height. Okay, that actually makes way more sense. Why would you use position for that? I'm not sure. So, I mean the height. Okay, cool. So now we're just missing the game render box, and here this is actually kind of could actually say yeah, actually we don't have render. Okay, fine, whatever. We'll just fine. We'll just leave it like that. And so now all that's missing is that game render box, and that has all the magic in it. So I want to walk through that with some time. So take a little time off here. Gonna have some dinner. Most likely we'll be back in about, I would say, an hour. Probably not right on the top of the hour, but I'll give it my best. So, but I will tweet. So again, Twitter, follow me on Twitter. Obviously also if you follow me on so this is my Twitter, where am I? Chase Lawrence. Obviously also if you follow me on Twitch here, and you turn on notifications, you will get notifications when I'm back on. But for now I will turn this off, and I hope you're enjoying it so far. And yes, I don't know when back to the question, don't know when I'll stream JavaScript. For now, I'm building this game in Flutter. Thank you. See you later.